Let's open up the Vintage Collection 3.75-inch figure of the heavy battle droid from Battlefront II. Varykino. If it's Star Wars, we collect it. Hello there, thanks for visiting Varykino. This past week we had a really fun new update for the Star Wars online video game, Star Wars The Old Republic. So as you can imagine, I've been playing a lot of that online and having a blast. And I also recently opened up the Vintage Collection Jetpack Trooper 3.75-inch figure from Jedi Survivor. So in keeping up the fun of celebrating Star Wars video games, I dug through my archive of Vintage Collection figures that I haven't opened up yet and pulled out some gaming great figures to celebrate video games and add them to my opened figure collection. And I'm going to start things off with the heavy battle droid from Battlefront II. Thank you so much for hanging out with me today. Coming up really soon, I'll take a closer look at the battle droid out of the packaging as well as the accessories. But first, let's take one last look at the backing card. The packaging for the Vintage Collection line of 3.75-inch figures is heavily inspired by the original Kenner Star Wars action figure packaging from the 1970s and 80s. In fact, you can see for this figure we have an almost identical replica of the Star Wars logo here with the double chrome racetrack, which is generally only reserved for Star Wars A New Hope figures. In fact, now we have the more modern design of the Star Wars logo at the top. The logo here, as we can see, Battlefront 2 in the red and a single chrome racetrack. I much prefer this modern design. I think it matches better with a lot of the other ones where we have the TV series or movie title here in the top in red rather than using the Star Wars logo. I think that one should be kept just for Star Wars, especially with the inclusion of the Luke and Leia artwork here, slightly obscured by price stickers on both card backs. I really like the character art that Hasbro uses for their gaming greats 3.75-inch action figures. Because it is generally not a screenshot from a video game, it is specifically crafted for the use on packaging here. So we've got a really nice clear image of the heavy battle droid posed with one of those longer battle droid blaster rifles there, and it's just nicely lit. We've got some really cool action going on here as well, though of course because we do have the Star Wars logo here at the top, the game logo is included here above the Kenner logo where it reads Battlefront 2. I do think that's just a tiny little bit distracting. I like the cleaner look where the logo is at the top. And I think it's also interesting that this one is a little bit unique in the fact that we have a matching color for the figure with the accent color for the title plate. We have heavy battle droid in a white font against a dark brown color, which is also used behind the figure. Generally, we have a contrasting color, which really helps the details of the figure and the accessories stand out. But this is almost a complete match for the bronze tone colors of the figure itself. So it looks a little bit less clear when looking at all of these dark colored accessories. We've got a backpack, antenna, a short blaster rifle, and a longer blaster rifle accessory there. It's going to be a lot of fun going through all of those. Moving on to the back. Now this one is an older figure, VC193. We can see that we still have the black vintage inspired backing card style here. And for the gaming greats line, they generally only featured other gaming greats figures. So we have 4 here rather than the wider grid, and we have a lot of text here. We do have a little bit of text noting about the gaming greats line. It reads, "Celebrate iconic moments from a galaxy far, far away with figures inspired by the Star Wars video games." And that is read in a couple of different languages there. Now, if you look at a slightly more modern gaming greats figure, like the one I just opened recently, the Jedi Survivor Jetpack Trooper, the new backing card style does not feature the gaming greats logo anymore, which I think is kind of a shame. It has completely disappeared from this modern style where we have the accent color and the backing card and the action figure there. I kind of miss it. I like the fact that they were really sort of celebrating the Star Wars video games in the main figure line, but of course that's on the back of the backing card. It doesn't make a big difference, but I just really like having the game logo there rather than up here with the Kenner logo there. So it is a fun packaging style, of course, but I do think it's going to look really cool when we get them out of the packaging. So let's open them up. So now I have the heavy battle droid 3.75-inch figure out of the packaging, as well as the 4 included accessories. So let's get stuck stuck in and check out the details on the figure first. And as you can see, it does actually stand up. I was a little bit worried because of the very thin legs, the fine articulation points, but for now the figure does actually stand. Of course, that might be a little bit different once we start attaching those accessories, especially the backpack and the longer rifle accessory. Those might start to sway the center of gravity and balance there for this figure, but I was actually quite surprised. Another thing that I noticed is that he does actually flex and bend at the articulation points very easily. I was kind of hoping that perhaps some of his joints would be a little bit stiff just to keep his legs straight. I have some sort of Phantom Menace era ones that tend to sort of do the limbo and lean back a little bit over time because of the joints at the knees kind of giving way a little bit, especially if they have a backpack that's sort of a jetpack sort of control piece on the back there. So a little bit worried about that because the newer vintage collection figures, they do have pegs on the underside, so you can put them on stands, but they're smaller than the older era figures, so they don't fit a lot of my stands. So I think this one's going to be one of those ones where he's going to need a stand after spending a little bit of time on display. But let's get stuck in and check out the details. Now, this one, of course, is the Battlefront II Battle Droid, the heavy Battle Droid, which it has a really unique paint job. We've got this fantastic dark bronze metallic finish on a lot of the areas and a dark grey accent color. It's really quite fun. Of course, I know it's perhaps not as exciting as a brand new character figure like we're getting in some of the new waves of the vintage collection, but there's just something so iconic about the Battle Droids. I played a lot of the original Battlefront games going all the way back to sort of 2004 when those old ones came out, and they were always really quite scary coming around the corner to those huge big groups of Battle Droids and Super Battle Droids and Droidicas and stuff like that. So I'm quite nostalgic about Battle Droids from Battlefront series of video games. So this is a really fun variant, of course. So he's got quite some neat silver metallic weathering on this one as well, which is a little bit unique for a Battle Droid. A lot of the times we don't quite have the silver accenting. We tend to see that on some of the other characters, so I quite like that. Works really well with this sort of bronze metallic paint finish. So we've got some weathering on the nose, a little bit above the left eye, and it's kind of scattered all over, shoulders, arms, chest. There is some really nice weathering there. Now on the front of the legs, he's bending a little bit here. We've got it on the thighs, a little bit down the front here, across on the shins there. Not as much on the back, but I do find that a lot across the Hasbro vintage collection. Sometimes there's some really neat weathering and paint effects on the front, and then you turn them around and they look a little bit clean. I generally think a Battle Droid that would be getting this weathered in battle is probably going to get hit from behind as well, but the weathering unfortunately isn't evident there. Now if I put the backpack on, which we'll do in a moment, there is weathering on the back of the backpack. So if I put that into place, there would be some silver weathering here on the back, but I just kind of wish there was maybe just a little bit of a touch of it, perhaps on the legs, just to sort of tie everything together. But I really do like the paint finish. Now, of course, we're dealing with a much smaller surface area, and we don't really have face details. So in terms of the actual cleanliness of the paint lines, well, it's a weathered Battle Droid. It can, you know, sometimes you can get away with a little bit of sort of, you know, fuzzy edges on the sort of the paint lines and stuff like that because it's sort of weathered. We do have some very nice painted details, particularly on the droid eyes. This kind of inset detail is showing up quite nicely against that metallic paint there. And we do have some really nice clean lines, like at the top here. I think that that's quite nice. Generally speaking, the rest of it, you know, you could probably get away with more damage, but the paint lines here, nice and clean. I like the specific sort of the paint scheme on this one, of course referencing the video game, but it is nice to see this and translated into an actual figure form. He is moving a lot as I'm holding him, I have to say. So let's just get straight in and check out the articulation, because I do like the paint job. I don't think there's much really to say about it though. I do think there is perhaps just a little bit of a subtle difference. And I feel like this forearm and hand section is made out of a bronzy tone plastic rather than the paint that is used on the body and even the face here. There was just a very subtle, if I can just sort of cross his arm here, just a very subtle, sort of more of a sheen difference. The color is a fairly good match, but when you sort of get them close, you can sort of tell that this isn't a metallic paint. It just looks a little bit more like a plastic color. just because of the way that plastic just has that kind of shine to it that's a little bit different to, especially compared to a metallic paint. And of course it kind of stops at the elbows there, which is often a bit of a tell there as well. But other than that, I think that that's a pretty good match. So of course we've got pretty standard Battle Droid articulation. Not really going to turn his head quite the same as a human, but we can still get some sort of side to side turning there, front and back. He has got the stalk, which you can push down a little bit there as well. Kind of gives him a little bit of a sort of a hunched expression there. And I can just sort of pull that one up so you can get a little bit of sort of height variability, which is of course something you're generally not going to find in a humanoid character figure there as well. Now we've got a lot of articulation. This is quite easy to move, which I'm quite glad about, because the join here, particularly this section here of the arm, that is a very thin piece of plastic coming right into the articulation point at the elbow. So if this was stiff, I feel like I'd be putting a lot of tension across the plastic there. So I'm glad that it actually moves fairly well at both the elbow and the shoulder. Of course, we're not really going to go out to the side much. It's not really a pose that this one is going to do so well. It's more about swinging in those particular planes of movement. Again, at the other side, moving really nicely and freely, which I'm glad about. Now, we don't really have too much in the way of sort of wrist articulation. You can kind of see we've just got that straight sculpting there of the hands. I can't really rotate it at the hand. In fact, I'm pretty sure this is just one solid cast. It's a little bit flexible, so I can kind of twist that a little bit, which may help us when it comes to holding the blaster rifle accessories. But for the most part, it is just those sort of singular planes. I can do a little bit sort of outward, a little bit with the arms, but I don't think I'm getting full sort of upward right angle at the shoulder there. So I'm just kind of getting a little bit of movement. You can just see there, which is probably about as much as I need. Which, yeah, okay, that's pretty cool. Okay, so we don't really have a mid-torso articulation here. I feel like there was one particular Battle Droid where I felt like you could sort of separate the two pieces, and it was such a hard trick trying to sort of get this heavier torso part to sort of balance and click on it to this kind of this fork shape here. So I'm very glad that this is actually fixed. He's not going to sort of twist or wobble or separate at those sections there. The next point of articulation we have is at the hips. Now this is such a narrow join, but he does move freely, and of course he's got a greater range of motion than humans because he can kind of rotate at all of these points. So he can bring his knees up all the way. So you can do some really cool, those kind of ready to deploy sort of folded Battle Droid poses with the knee coming almost all the way up to the chest. I can just push it there just a little bit. If I move that one out, I can kind of push it there in, but it's going to sit about there. That's really quite a tight angle. And again, with the other side, very nice. And of course we can go all the way. I can get to about all the way there. Yep, all the way to the back. So very free. We're not really going to go out to the sides much, just a little bit of a wiggle, the same as at the shoulder. It's not a full sort of standard sort of hip joint like we see on some of those human figures, but enough variability there. And we've also got, it's a little bit stiff, which I'm kind of glad about, but we do have ankle articulation, very small attachment point there. And you can just kind of see the actual functioning peg attachment point there at the ankle. It's a very small attachment point. Quite impressed, really. I mean, I think about some of the other sort of droid figures, like the Dark Trooper and K2SO. I feel like they had thicker attachments for some of their joins. This is very thin. And I know that those ones have much bigger torsos. They're probably dealing with a bit more of sort of a stability there, because of course this is a very light figure. It doesn't have to support quite as much weight on those thin ankles, so you can probably get away with that. But yeah, about as much articulation as I would hope to expect. It's going to do what I need for posing. Just really, really cool. I do have a couple of earlier made Battle Droid figures, just because I'm kind of curious to see how different this modern era vintage collection figure would be, because I generally consider the vintage collection to be much more refined and smaller detail, and higher articulation compared to even just a handful of years ago. So I am really curious to see how this one is going to look alongside some of the ones from the episode 1 and episode 2 eras that I have on hand. So let's check out the accessories. So of course, for the back, we have 2 different accessories that we can swap in and out. The first, we have this 2-pronged antenna with some nice paintwork to match the actual paint scheme of the droid, of course. We've got these sort of 2 stalks, slightly different lengths, painted tips. We've even got a little bit of silver weathering on those stalks there, and then we've got that sort of lower loop there and an attachment peg here. So I'm going to try that one on the back. So it looks like this one, this is the smaller of the 2 pegs. It looks like that one's going to click in there. Just going to line this up. Tiny little peg. Okay, so that's going to click in like that. Looks pretty good. Again, I can just make out, I think it's hard to tell. I think this is the same plastic as the forearm, so it is the grey sections that are painted. As you can see, they are very flexible, so they won't snap if you accidentally hit this, which is quite good. But of course, you do need to make sure that you're not sort of leaning things into them because they might sort of soften and curve over time. So I'm curious if this, I don't think this peg is going to work. Yes, so it's not really... We've got the sort of visible peg there on the back because this doesn't fit on over the top. So from the front, it looks pretty cool, but from the back, we've got that visible sort of peg hole there on the back. But of course, I'm sure many of us do actually pose our action figures facing forward. So I think that looks pretty cool and sort of quite a visible accessory there from the front. Some backpack sort of style accessories, jetpacks and that are really hidden on the back of figures. So of course, now we have the sort of the backpack accessory here, of course. We've got those same sort of 2 antenna, but we've got a much larger component here. I do like the weathering on this one. It matches up really nicely. We've got a little bit more prominent silver weathering here on those sort of antenna stalks there. We've got the metallic paint this time. This looks like perhaps this was made in the grey plastic because we can see that grey plastic there on the back. So this time we've got the metallic sort of bronzy copper color instead of the metallic plastic used for this one. So I feel like this one's a pretty good match. Now this one utilizes the larger peg hole there. We've got a little bit of a curved shape on that attachment point. I'm hoping it's actually going to fit nicely on the sort of slightly curved back of the Battle Droid here as well. So we've got a circular peg into an angled peg hole here. So hoping that's a nice fit. We can see that that curve matches up there nicely. I can't actually see much. I can just see a little bit of light through there if I get the right angle. But that is a nice, secure fit. It doesn't feel like it's going to fall out. But I have to say, that has definitely added to the weight of this figure. I'm not sure how well he's going to stand up now that I have put that on. But I think that that looks really cool. I know it certainly does introduce a few posing difficulties. Well, I just got to test this out. I'm not sure how well. It might take a little bit of work. Okay, so he will probably get there if I spend a little bit of time working with it, just because he is so flexible in those leg joints. But I feel like I could probably, with a little bit of care, actually get him to balance. Of course, a little bit of a bump and he's probably going to topple over, but I can actually get him to balance. That's quite impressive. Even just with a little bit of very quick posing there in the legs, I can probably do a better job of adjusting him later on. But that's actually really quite cool because I kind of personally like this as the finished sort of pose accessory. Just something about, even though I know I'm not turning the figure around, just being able to only see that antenna stalk and knowing that there's a peg hole on the back. I don't know. Sometimes those unseen details, you know it's still there even though you don't see it when you're walking by your display. So let's check out the included accessories. So we have the iconic Battle Droid blaster. This one looks like it is cast in a darker, almost a metallic finish, dark grey. But we've got some really interesting silver metallic weathering. It's quite interesting to see just how much weathering they have put on this small accessory. It's kind of all over all of the different components there, and on the other side as well. You can see it picking up the light there. So I'm assuming that this is going to fit pretty well into the Battle Droid hands. We have had a lot of Battle Droid figures over the years. Now, of course, this plastic isn't quite rubbery, but because it's so slender, we do have a little bit of flex. So sometimes you've got to be really careful with the plastic, particularly around the wrists of certain figures while you're sort of getting accessories in. But I'm hoping that that flex means that that will go really nicely in there. So it's not a tight fit. In fact, he almost might drop that. This might be a little bit more of a two-handed job there. I do feel like if I shake him around, he might drop it, but it does hold in there easily. Now, it is a little bit tricky because I'm not really able to turn the wrist around because we've just got a straight seam here. I can't turn the wrist to kind of get much of sort of that two-handed underhold that you can do with generally sort of the human figures. And yeah, I don't think that's I don't want to twist him. It just kind of wants to go back there. So I think he's probably going to be a one-handed blaster pose for this particular figure because I can't move that wrist. And the elbow also is not really letting me completely twist the forearm in a way that's going to get that two-handed. Maybe I kind of rested a little bit, but yeah, he does hold it, just not as securely as some of the humanoid figures with their blaster rifle accessories. But that's really cool. Now we're going on to the longer one. So this one very much reminds me of the old Sandtrooper long blaster rifle as seen in New Hope, and we've got some really neat finishes here. Now I believe this one is, I can't quite tell if it's painted in this darker metallic finish or if it is cast in this plastic because it has some weathering. I think it's cast in this plastic, and then we've got like an interesting sort of almost a brushed silver because it's kind of catching the light in a few places. It's really quite nice. I like that. Some really nice detail there, but I'm not quite sure how this figure is going to hold onto this one. We've just got this one grip here, no trigger finger, and without the ability to really do a two-handed pose, that could be a little bit tricky. I don't really want to be bending my figure as much because of the really slender joints that we have, particularly on the arms of such a slender character. So let's go in. Yeah, that's a really easy fit. That just kind of almost falls into place. There's not much for him to do, so I can kind of like rest it on the other hand, but he's not really going to. I don't really want to twist. I'm kind of at a loss on how to get sort of a two-handed pose with this particular figure, and with such a large blaster rifle. I think this one's definitely going to be a stand figure if I want to do something like this, just out of curiosity. Let's see if I can actually balance him. Oh my goodness, okay. I can actually, that's a little bit precarious, but he does actually balance. That's actually fairly impressive. I was a little bit worried with just how easily I can move some of those leg joints. I thought surely putting some of these larger accessories is going to instantly tip him over or start to pull at those articulation points and make him keel over. But he does actually stand up. That's quite impressive. Very, very cool. Okay, so that is a really cool Battle Droid figure. So I'm just going to snap on his sort of big battery pack here, his controlled backpack, because I quite like that in terms of the look. And I'm just going to put his blaster rifle. We'll test it in the other hand. And of course, it's the same hand. Some of the humanoid figures, they have different sculpting. Sometimes they have separate trigger fingers. Sometimes they have more of a C grip. The Battle Droids have identical grips left and right, so we can sort of pose them two-handed. We could put the long one in one hand and the short one in the other hand. But yeah, it looks cool. He can hold that one there as well. Looking very good. Now, of course, it's going to be spindly. He's going to be, oh, okay, yep, we are getting some interesting posing here. I'm probably not going to trust this figure to stand up on his own long term, but I'm actually surprised that he can actually pose up like that. I thought that that would be near impossible to actually get something with such small articulation and seam joins there standing up. So that is actually very cool. I think that that's really neat. And I think that the bronzy color is just such a fun variation. Now, I wish the vintage collection for us here in New Zealand was at a price point where it's a little bit more budget friendly for army building, because battle droids do look pretty cool if you can get a few of them going all together. And because this one is such a unique color tone, I'm going to have to sort of have him as a little bit more of like a special agent. I'm not able to sort of army build this particular one, so he's going to be sort of by himself in my gaming greats lineup rather than sort of trying to build a full scene of all of these ones all together. But this one was really cool. I've had him on his backing card for a while because I haven't fully built out my gaming greats section, but I've been having so much fun opening up a few recently. I'm just ready to get stuck in and open up a whole bunch. So now that I have this one all set up, I just want to take a very quick comparison with a couple of older ones. So this one here is, as you can see, more of the Geonosis colors around the Saga sort of episode 2 era. And I also have from the Phantom Menace era. They're still in their packaging. I'm just going to lay this one down. This one is a 2-pack. So we've got the Battle Droid and the free included Battle Droid. There was a little bit of a difference. The sort of the one that's technically the figure has articulated knees, and the bonus Battle Droid had fixed knees and obviously less of a paint job there. But just looking at these ones in their case, I can already just sort of hold these ones up, and you can see the massive difference in the thighs, especially just how slender the vintage collection figure is in terms of the thighs, especially with that other figure. So of course it's nice to see Hasbro, you know, keeping up with the vintage collection and making sure that we've got that sort of fine level of detail and articulation. So that's really quite fun. A little bit hard to show. I've got so many battle droids in my action figure display, I've kind of lost track of which ones came out in which years. But of course, if they're still carded, I know it's from the Phantom Menace era. So it's just really fun to see those ones and their different color schemes compared to this one from the modern vintage collection. And of course, this one here is from the more of the sort of Saga episode 2 era. And again, this one's going to be a little bit bendy because I'm holding them slightly awkwardly. But you can see that we do have very similar proportions, but a little bit finer, I have to say, just a little bit smaller, a little bit more refined in terms of the articulation and in terms of the scale as well, just a little bit on the smaller side compared to this one. You can kind of see in terms of the legs and everything, just a little bit smaller. That one's on a stand, but if I kind of hold this one up, it does actually come in a lot smaller, which is kind of interesting because you kind of hope that you'll be able to sort of put them all together as a little bit of a battle droid army. Interesting that this is a little bit more smaller, perhaps more appropriately proportioned. But yeah, this was such a fun figure, and it's fun to see the differences compared to some of those earlier battle droid figures. This one's been on my display for quite some years now, nearly 20 probably, but it's still fun getting an iconic battle droid figure from the vintage collection line out of its packaging so I can check out all of the details. And I'm quite impressed with the level of posability and articulation, as one should from the vintage collection. You're certainly paying for it. But this was a really fun unboxing, and I can't wait to open up more figures from my Gaming Greats line. I've got some other fun ones coming up soon. Thank you so much for hanging out with me today as I opened up another Star Wars collectible and had a lot of fun checking out the details and doing a little bit of comparison as well. I hope you have a wonderful morning, afternoon, or evening, wherever you are in the galaxy, and let's hang out again very soon for more Star Wars fun. May the Force be with you. If you're a vintage collection fan, I recently opened up the Jetpack Trooper figure, VC336. That video is linked here in case you haven't already seen it, as well as a whole vintage collection playlist. This is the way.